Hey, fellow shit shows, Barb Nagel here from Higher Power Coaching and Consulting and the host of the Fragmented to Whole Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery podcast. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Nobody's shown up yet, but I want to go ahead and at least get us started, even if no one shows up, so that there'll be a recording to guide people through what we're talking about today, which is about discovering our real identity. I don't think it's a mistake that this is promise number one in ACA promises, because so many of us don't know who the fuck we are. We don't know where we end and other people begin. We don't know what's our responsibility and what's not our responsibility. We don't know what we like, what we dislike. I know that was me. I was a chameleon, which, by the way, I prided myself in that. And I actually just mentioned this on the podcast, upcoming podcast I recorded. I didn't even know what I drank. I was a very heavy drinker until my early 40s. I'm not an alcoholic, but I drank abusively until then. But I didn't even have my own drink. So when I started, I drank beer because that's what everybody drank and it was cheap. And then in my late 20s, I dated a guy who was really into wine and he taught me all about wine. So I decided on which wines I liked. Well, then I dated a guy who was into Jack Daniels. And so I drank that. And then I met a guy who was into craft beers. And so I drank those. So I didn't even have my own damn drink. Like, that is how much of me was up for negotiation. And what I'm going to take you through today is a worksheet that I created for my clients and for my sponsees, because they were like, I don't really know who I am. I don't know what I like. And this is the thing about boundaries is like, what is the boundary of me? Like, where do I end and other people begin? And the thing is, we get to decide that. And when we're not used to having choices in our life, which most of us in ACA are not, because we have internalized the victim mentality, which tells us we don't have options, we don't have choices. So I'm going to walk you through this worksheet. It's pretty straightforward, but I want to go ahead and share my screen and there it is. Okay. And just walk you through this. So this is something that is actually meant to take you a period of time. It's not something that you sit down and do once. But the principle here is it's really hard to get to know somebody if you don't spend any time with them. So your first assignment here is to spend a chunk of time, like 1 to 2 hours alone with nothing to do, and just meander wherever you want to meander, whether it's literally meandering around your house or outside, or at the local trail or at the local shopping mall, but just wherever your mind and body and spirit take you, and just whatever comes to mind, just see what comes up in your head, and then write a few words about your experience and what it was like, and that will give you some kind of information. So you may think nothing came up. Well, then write down about nothing coming up. Then your next assignment is to write some things that you're passionate about. So this is something you could talk about all day long. It could be dogs. It could be motorcycles. It could be insects. It could be makeup. It could be the Real Housewives show. It could be collecting something. It could be recovery. It doesn't really matter what it is. So what is something you could talk about all day long right now? Just write that stuff down. And then remember, like, what were you passionate about when you were a little kid? Were there things that you just couldn't get enough of, like toys? You're like, I had to have this toy, or I had to have this collection, or I had to have this. I know for me, when I was in second grade, I had to have these white go-go boots. So let's see, that would have been 1970. So that explains that. And then how about when you were a teen? What were you really passionate about? I mean, many of us were passionate about hanging out with our friends or getting high or something like that, makeup, dating, whatever that is. And then as a young adult, what were you passionate about as a young adult? Were you, I know that I was really into partying, but I got introduced to the whole self-help genre when I was like 24. And then that just became like the purpose of my life. And again, we're doing this just a little bit at a time. If you want to sit down and do a whole bunch at a time, I don't recommend doing all of it at once, because you want to allow yourself to, like, I think of it as like letting the information percolate in your mind. So you know, what I intended to do on this workshop was to give time for people to actually do some of this writing. Obviously, it doesn't make sense for me to stop and do that now. So the next part is your gifts. So what are you good at? Where have you acquired a deep knowledge on something? This could be something that is a hobby that you have. It could be like a sports team that you're interested in. It could be something you do for work. I know a lot about research, you know, I know a lot about boundaries. I know a lot about entrepreneurship. I know a lot about networking, you know, I know a lot about personal development and mindset and stuff like that. So whatever like gifts you have, and if you have a hard time coming up with what your gifts are, ask some people, or if you're the kind of person who has a resume, look at what you write on your resume, because your resume is where you're supposed to do the most bragging. And then this to me is like the wicked fun part. So I just came up with this random list of a whole bunch of things for you to think about where your interests lie. Now, this universe is filled with like an infinite number of things. So this is just a finite little list. But the idea here is when I say the word activities, what comes up for you? Because what comes up for me is not going to be what comes up for you. And if nothing comes up, then don't put anything there. When I say automotive, it could be, I don't care. For me personally, I love me some muscle cars. My favorite car is the Dodge Challenger. Before that, for about 10 years or so, it was the Dodge Charger. And then for decades before that, it was like a 1968 Camaro. I just fucking love muscle cars. When it comes to collectibles, I personally don't want to collect anything. I've known, like I had one friend, she collected bunnies and literally everybody for the rest of her life gave her bunny everything. And then I knew someone else who collected frogs and everybody gave him frog everything. Like I don't want a house full of fucking frogs, so I don't collect things. So what comes to mind for me here is I don't want collectibles. Creating things. So that could be creating ideas. It could be creating, you know, manuscripts or scripts for plays. It could be poetry. It could be music. It could be, you know, dance moves, anything that you create, and so on and so on and so on. And so this is meant for you to start keeping track of things that you give a shit about. And also this particular document, you can either print it out and handwrite on it, or these boxes are actually typed. See how I'm typing I in there. So you can type right in them, whichever one you choose, but there's a whole bunch of stuff here. So there is going to be multiple things on here. And then, so there's an asterisk next to reading, and somehow that footnote didn't get carried onto here. But the idea here is it doesn't have to be books. It could be that you like reading comic books. It could be you like reading play scripts. I know that for many years, if I went to someone's house and they didn't have reading material in the bathroom, I'd read the back of the fucking shampoo bottle. I don't know what it was. It was just like, I need to be taking information in at all times. I don't have that thing anymore. But like, what is it that you could absorb information about? It could be reading on social media. It could be reading, you know, blog posts or, you know, things like that. So it doesn't have to be traditional book reading. And then this is where I want you to get some feedback from people in various aspects of your life. And I want you to ask them, what are 3 things that stand out to you about me? Like, what are the first 3 things that pop in your head? So what I have here is for you to list who's the person in my work life I'm going to ask and what's the date? Because if you make this list, you're so much more likely to follow through. And again, we're doing this because we're trying to figure out for ourselves who we are. So many of us have no idea, like all that kind of stuff. So who's a family person, community, education? I don't know why there's a Y there. I guess I got to fix that. People that you do recreation or hobbies with. Do you have a best friend? Personally, I don't have one. I have some favorites. If you have a romantic partner, and then someone who's just an acquaintance that you don't know that well, they're on the periphery of your life. And then when you start hearing these things, I would recommend that you write them down, because if there's some overlap, which there likely will be, those things are going to tell you something about yourself. So keep note of that here. And then if you're someone who wants some kind of outside feedback, I've listed here 4 of some of the most popular personal assessment tools. I think 1 or 2 of them you might have to pay for, but the DISC assessment, so you click on that and it'll take you to the website. This is something that is often an assessment that is done in the workplace. The Enneagram, this is probably the only personal assessment tool I have never taken. Everybody tells me I would love it. I just haven't done it yet. The Myers-Briggs type indicator, this is the one that I am the most familiar with. It is sometimes used in the workplace, but also in many other places. I was introduced to it in my spiritual community. And I am an ENFP, in case you're wondering. So that means I am an extrovert, I'm an intuitive, I'm a feeler, and I forgot what P stands for, but it's basically, I'm more about process than outcome, or more about like process than task. And what's interesting is all of my colleagues all thought that rather than a P, that I was a J. This is, for those of you who don't know anything about this, don't worry about it. It's not important information. And then there's the Clifton Strengths Finder. This is another one that I really like. My personal first #1 strength is connection. I'm a connector by nature, but it doesn't just mean connecting people to other people. It also means feeling connected to the universe and the world and the people around me. So that is it for this document. I don't really have any podcast episodes to go with this. I normally do when it comes to these workshops, but you know, maybe I need to actually create a podcast, and maybe I'll do it based on this worksheet. But anyway, sorry that I didn't get to see you live. I would love to have you message me and let me know how this helped you. I am a member of the Shitshow community, but I literally only go in there to get the Zoom link for the Sunday meeting. I don't look at messages in there. It's nothing personal. It's just, I got so many other platforms. So you can either DM me on Instagram at Higher Power Coaching, or you can email me barb@higherpowercc.com. All right, enjoy. And I hope that you enjoy this process of getting to know yourself.